Imagine someone telling you, your life won't last forever. How would you spend the rest of your day? What about the rest of the year? Or decade? This isn't just a philosophical question. This is a reality that catches up with us every day as we save on ourselves and lose ourselves in the process. A woman who saves on herself makes men want to save only on her, said Erich Maria Remarque. And you know what? He was absolutely right. When I first read these words, I felt a chill of recognition run through me. How many times had I postponed my own dreams? How many times had I said, I don't need that, while simultaneously saying yes to everything others asked of me? And what did I get in return? Exhaustion, unfulfillment, and a feeling that life was passing me by. Today, I'll reveal the truth behind Remarque's words. Why do we so often give up our dreams, needs, and desires? And why is no one grateful for it? Why do we fall into the trap of believing that saving on ourselves is a virtue? What happens when we finally stop this self-destructive behavior? Stay until the end because I'll reveal how I stopped saving on myself and how you can do the same before it's too late. The root of the problem. Since childhood, we've been taught how to be modest, polite, and good. Mothers, grandmothers, aunts, they all taught us the same lesson. Don't ask for too much. Be content with little. Put others before yourself. And so we grew up believing that sacrificing ourselves for others is the pinnacle of virtue. Remember the fairy tales we listened to as children. Cinderella, who works hard and doesn't complain. Snow White, who unconditionally cares for 7 dwarfs. Even modern heroines often build their identity around sacrificing for others. These stories don't just tell us how to behave, they shape our inner voice, our moral compass. But what happens in the real world? Our modesty becomes an opportunity for exploitation. Our kindness becomes a weapon in the hands of the unscrupulous. Our willingness to sacrifice our needs becomes an expectation, not an exception. Let me ask you, when was the last time you did something just for yourself, something that fulfills you without feeling guilty? Most women I know can't remember such a moment. And that is the tragedy of our collective experience. The psychology of sacrifice. Let's look at what psychologists say about this phenomenon. According to research by Dr. Robert Cialdini, an expert in social psychology, people tend to develop patterns of sacrifice that become part of their identity. When a woman begins to define herself through her ability to sacrifice for others, it becomes her primary role. Interestingly, the human brain begins to release certain neurotransmitters, like dopamine, when we behave in accordance with our established identity. So sacrifice can become an addiction, a biochemical addiction. But there's also the other side of the coin. Research shows that long-term self-sacrifice leads to exhaustion, depression, and bitterness. Clinical psychologist Dr. Karen Hall talks about compassion fatigue, a state in which a person who constantly cares for others becomes emotionally, mentally, and physically exhausted. Dr. Hall says, when we constantly care about the needs of others and neglect our own, we exhaust our capacity for empathy. Paradoxically, we become less able to care for others precisely because we've depleted all our resources. In my practice, I've encountered countless women who have put the needs of others before their own for so long that they've completely lost touch with their own desires and needs. When I ask them, what brings you joy, they are speechless. When I ask them, what would you do if you had a whole day just for yourself, they can't even imagine such a scenario. Identity transformation. When exactly do we start saving on ourselves? Often it happens at key life moments, when we fall in love or when we become parents. Before these events, we were ourselves. We had our hobbies, friends, interests, desires. And then the picture changes. Suddenly it's not just our reflection in the mirror, there's a partner and children too. And what do? We sacrifice our time, our friends, our hobbies. Psychologist Carl Jung spoke about personas, masks we wear in different life roles. The problem arises when the mask of a mother or a partner completely takes over our authentic personality. When we forget that we are more than the role we play. The partner quickly gets used to our sacrifices, and the children have never known a different version of us, only this martyr who constantly gives. And then, what if we decide to stop this pattern? Will someone tell us, "Thank you very much, now it's time for you"? No, the exact opposite will happen. Everyone will be angry. Why? Because through our behavior, we've set expectations. We've taught the people around us that it's normal for us to give up everything for them. And when we try to change that dynamic, we encounter resistance. Resistance that often breaks our determination and returns us to old patterns. Neuroscience and self-denial. Modern neuroscience reveals fascinating insights into how continuous self-denial affects our brain. Dr. Rick Hansen, a neuropsychologist and author of Hardwiring Happiness, explains that our brain has a so-called negative bias, an evolutionary tendency to pay more attention to negative than positive experiences. When we continually put the needs of others before our own, we actually strengthen the neural pathways that support self-denial. We literally wire our brain to forget about our own needs. Even more interesting is that continuously ignoring your own needs can lead to decreased gray matter volume in parts of the brain responsible for self-regulation and decision-making. In other words, the more we ignore ourselves, the harder it becomes to recognize and meet our own needs. Dr. Hansen suggests a practice he calls taking in the good, consciously retaining positive experiences to create new, positive neural connections. This includes setting aside time for yourself and consciously enjoying those moments without guilt or rush. The philosophical aspect of sacrifice. Philosopher Simone de Beauvoir wrote about how society imposes on women the role of the other, one who exists only in relation to a man. She says, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." Part of that, becoming, includes learning to put one's own needs last. In her revolutionary work, The Second Sex, de Beauvoir analyzes how patriarchal society glorifies female sacrifice while simultaneously belittling female autonomy. She writes, "Woman's misfortune is that she is historically defined as the other. She is defined and differentiated in relation to man, not he in relation to her. She is the inessential as opposed to the essential. He is the subject, he is the absolute, she is the other." Existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre spoke about authenticity, the idea of living in accordance with our true values, not according to the expectations of others. But how can we be authentic if we constantly suppress our desires and needs? Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche distinguished between master and slave morality. Slave morality, in his view, glorifies suffering, renunciation, and sacrifice, while master morality values self-affirmation, development, and personal power. Isn't it interesting that women have been taught slave morality for centuries, while men are encouraged toward master morality? Social context. We need to ask ourselves, why does society celebrate women who sacrifice? Why are movies, books, and commercials full of portrayals of mothers who give up everything for their children, wives for their husbands, daughters for their parents? Let's look at the statistics. Women still perform a disproportionate share of household chores and childcare, even when they work full-time. According to research by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, women spend an average of 4.5 hours a day on unpaid work, compared to less than 2.5 hours for men. In many cultures, there's still an implicit expectation that a woman will put her career on hold for the family, that she'll give up her free time to maintain the home, that she'll sacrifice her own ambitions to support her partner's ambitions. Even the language we use to describe women reveals these biases. Selfish is one of the worst insults that can be directed at a woman, especially a mother. But what does it actually mean to be selfish? Often it just means having your own needs and boundaries. This isn't just a personal choice. This is a social pattern that shapes all of us, often unconsciously. The cost of saving on yourself. What happens when you continually save on yourself? First, you damage your health. Stress, exhaustion, and neglect of your own well-being have serious physical consequences. According to research by the American Institute of Stress, chronic stress is associated with 6 leading causes of death: heart disease, cancer, lung disease, accidents, liver cirrhosis, and suicide. Women who continually neglect their own needs have a higher risk of these conditions. Second, you lose your identity. Who are you outside the role of mother, wife, daughter? Many women who constantly save on themselves can't answer that question. They've forgotten their dreams, their passions, their goals. They've forgotten what it looks like to do something just because they want to, not because they have to. Third, you teach others how to treat you. When you show that you need little, people give you little. First you save on yourself, and then everyone saves on you. This is a painful truth that many women discover too late. And finally, you miss out on life. Because life isn't just about serving others. Life is also about discovering yourself, growing, learning, trying new things. Life is joy. Life is passionately pursuing what fulfills you. Intergenerational pattern transfer. One of the deepest aspects of this problem is the way in which patterns of self-denial are passed from generation to generation. Girls who grow up watching their mothers continually sacrifice their own needs learn that this is normal. They internalize this lesson and repeat the same pattern in their adult lives. Research published in the journal Child Development shows that children learn behavioral patterns primarily through observation, not by listening to instructions. What message are we sending our daughters when we tell them they deserve everything, but treat ourselves as if we deserve nothing? We can break this cycle only by making a conscious decision to change our own behavior. Not just for ourselves, but for the next generation of women. Research on self-esteem. Professor of psychology at the University of Michigan, Dr. Christopher Peterson, conducted long-term research on the relationship between self-esteem and relationships with others. His results show that people who have healthy self-esteem and care for their own needs actually have higher quality and longer-lasting relationships. Why? Because they're not in relationships out of desperation or dependence, but out of choice. Because they set healthy boundaries. Because they teach others how to respect their time and energy. Dr. Kristen Neff, a leading researcher in the field of self-compassion, defines self-compassion as the ability to be kind to ourselves when we suffer, when we experience failure, or when we feel inadequate. Her research shows that people with high levels of self-compassion have better mental health, greater emotional resilience, and healthier relationships with others. In other words, by taking care of yourself, you become a better person for others as well. This isn't selfishness, it's self-maintenance. The difference between selfishness and self-care. Many women fear that if they start caring for their own needs, they'll become selfish. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding of the concept of self-care. Selfishness is exclusively focusing on your own needs at the expense of others. Self-care is caring for your own needs so you can be present for others as well. Imagine you're on a plane. What do they tell you in the safety instructions before takeoff? In case of a pressure drop, put the oxygen mask on your face first, then help others. Why? Because if you pass out from lack of oxygen, you won't be able to help anyone else. The same applies to life. If you're emotionally, mentally, or physically exhausted from constant self-denial, how can you truly be present for those you love? Psychologist Dr. Brené Brown says, self-care is not self-indulgence. It's taking responsibility for your own well-being and recognizing that we are the only ones responsible for creating the life we want to live. Cultural shift toward female strength. In recent decades, we've witnessed a gradual cultural shift toward recognizing female strength and autonomy. From the women's rights movement to modern feminist movements, women increasingly recognize their inherent worth and right to a fulfilled life. However, there's still a deep gap between these progressive ideals and the everyday reality of many women. On one hand, we celebrate women who have it all: career, family, social life. On the other hand, we rarely acknowledge the enormous price many women pay trying to achieve this unrealistic ideal. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology shows that women who try to balance multiple life roles without adequate self-care have a higher risk of burnout, depression, and physical health problems. The real cultural shift won't happen until we start valuing female autonomy as much as female caregiving. Until we stop expecting women to be everything to everyone and nothing to themselves. Learning from the history of strong women. History is full of examples of women who refuse to save on themselves despite social pressures. Frida Kahlo, Virginia Woolf, Marie Curie, Simone de Beauvoir, all of them, in their own way, demanded space for their needs, their work, their vision. Virginia Woolf wrote that a woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction. This simple statement was revolutionary in its time. Woolf was talking about women needing both financial independence and private space, two key elements for self-actualization. Frida Kahlo explored her own suffering through her art and transformed it into something beautiful. She never allowed herself to be defined by others, neither by her famous husband, nor by her difficult physical conditions, nor by social expectations. These women weren't perfect. They had their struggles, their doubts, their downfalls. But what made them exceptional was their willingness to demand space for themselves, for their dreams, for their vision. Empowerment and setting boundaries. How do you stop saving on yourself? The first step is recognizing the pattern. Ask yourself, do I regularly postpone my own needs to satisfy the needs of others? Do I feel guilty when I do something just for myself? Can I remember the last time I did something that truly brings me joy? The second step is setting boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls, they're fences with gates that you control. They allow you to decide how much you'll give and what you'll keep for yourself. Psychologist Brené Brown says, when we set boundaries, we may feel guilty, but in the long run, we'll lose much more self-respect if we don't set them. The third step is prioritizing self-care. Self-care isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It's regular time for yourself, without interruptions, without excuses. It can be 30 minutes of reading, an hour of walking, morning meditation, or an evening bath. It's your time. And finally, the fourth step is recognizing that your life is worth living for you. Not just for your children, partner, or parents, for you. Myths about self-care. There are many myths about self-care that prevent women from dedicating themselves to it. One of the most common is that self-care means selfishness. As we've already established, this is a fundamental misunderstanding of the concept. Another myth is that self-care must be expensive or extravagant. Spa days, luxury travel, expensive shopping. The truth is that self-care can be simple and free, a walk in nature, reading a book, talking with a friend, meditation. The third myth is that self-care requires a lot of time. I often hear women saying, I don't have time for myself. But self-care can be 5 minutes of deep breathing, 10 minutes of journal writing, 15 minutes of dancing to your favorite song. The fourth myth is that self-care comes last, after all other obligations are fulfilled. This is like trying to charge an empty phone at the end of the day. Self-care should be a priority, not something you do if you happen to have time left. The impact of media and social networks. Social networks have created a new dimension of pressure. Now we not only need to be perfect mothers, partners, and employees, but we also need to look perfect while doing it. Instagram and TikTok are full of perfect lives telling us we're not good enough. According to Stanford University research, exposure to social media is associated with increased levels of comparison with others and decreased sense of self-worth. We must ask ourselves, how many of our decisions to save on ourselves come from an inner feeling that we're not worth the investment? How much of it is a consequence of constant bombardment with messages that we're not good enough? It's necessary to consciously examine these messages and replace them with healthier narratives. Each of us has the right to our own space, our own time, our own dreams. This isn't a luxury, it's a basic human need. How to break the vicious circle of self-denial. One of the reasons why it's so difficult to stop saving on yourself is that self-denial is often a vicious circle. The more we neglect our needs, the worse we feel. The worse we feel, the more we believe we don't deserve better. And so the cycle continues. How do we break this vicious circle? First, we must recognize that self-denial is a learned behavior, not an innate trait. Second, we must start with small steps of self-care and gradually increase them. Third, we must surround ourselves with supportive people who will encourage us to value ourselves. Psychologist Dr. Alice Boyes suggests an anchoring technique, identifying one self-care activity that will serve as an anchor for your day. This could be a morning walk, evening reading, or afternoon meditation. This activity becomes an unchangeable part of your day, something you won't miss regardless of circumstances. Self-care in the workplace. A particularly challenging area for many women is self-care in the workplace. Research shows that women are more likely than men to take on additional tasks without compensation, less likely to ask for raises and promotions, and more often feel they need to work harder to prove their worth. Dr. Lois Frankel, author of Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office, has identified over 100 behaviors that sabotage women in the workplace. Many of them are related to excessive modesty, unwillingness to highlight their own achievements, and a tendency to put others' needs before their own. How do you practice self-care at work? First, learn to say no to additional tasks that aren't part of your job description. Second, ask for deserved raises and promotions. Third, take all your breaks and vacation days. Self-care in partner relationships. Many women fear that focusing on their own needs will harm their partner relationships. But the truth is that healthy relationships require two whole people, not one person who constantly sacrifices for the other. Therapist Esther Perel, author of Mating in Captivity, talks about the importance of maintaining your own identity within partner relationships. She says, "Love doesn't flourish in a vacuum of connection. It flourishes in the healthy space between two people." How do you practice self-care in partner relationships? First, communicate your needs clearly and without apology. Second, regularly set aside time just for yourself. Third, nurture your own interests and friendships. Fourth, share household chores and responsibilities equally. Self-care in motherhood. Perhaps the most challenging area for practicing self-care is motherhood. Society tells us that a good mother puts the needs of her children above everything else. But the truth is that an exhausted, frustrated, dissatisfied mother isn't the best mother a child can have. Psychologist Dr. Shefali Savoy, author of The Conscious Parent, talks about the importance of authenticity in parenting. She says, "Children don't need perfect parents, they need authentic parents." How do you practice self-care as a mother? First, reject the idea that you must be a perfect mother. Second, regularly set aside time just for yourself without feeling guilty. Third, seek and accept support from partners, family members, friends, paid helpers. Fourth, teach your children to respect your boundaries and needs. Practical strategies. Here are some practical strategies for how to stop saving on yourself. 1. Schedule appointments with yourself. Literally put them in your calendar as you would with any other important appointment. 2. Learn to say no without apologies. No, I can't do that. Period. No need for explanation or justification. 3. Start small. Maybe you can't immediately go on a 2-week vacation alone, but you can set aside 15 minutes a day for yourself. 4. Surround yourself with people who support your self-care. If your current relationships are built on your self-sacrifice, there might be resistance. But persevere. 5. Recognize that you'll feel guilty and do it anyway. Guilt isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. Often it's just a sign that you're doing something new. 6. Redefine what it means to be a good woman. A good woman isn't necessarily one who always sacrifices. A good woman can be one who shows strength, sets boundaries, and cares for her own needs. 7. Practice micro moments of self-care throughout the day. Take a deep breath before answering the phone. Stretch between tasks. Drink a glass of water and really feel it. 8. Create a morning self-care ritual before you start caring for others. Even if it means getting up 20 minutes earlier, that time can set the tone for the entire day. 9. Learn to recognize signs that you've given too much. Irritability, fatigue, bitterness, anxiety, these are all signs that your batteries are empty. 10. Imagine that you're your own best friend. How would you treat her? With what love and compassion would you approach her? Now try to apply that same relationship to yourself. Cultural differences. It's interesting to note that the attitude towards self-care differs significantly among cultures. For example, in Scandinavian countries, there's the concept of hygge, deliberately creating a comfortable, intimate environment that nurtures well-being. In Japan, there's ikigai, finding what fulfills you and gives you purpose. In Denmark, one of the happiest countries in the world, hygge is practiced as a way of life. This includes creating warmth, connection, and well-being in everyday life. Danes don't view time spent enjoying life's small pleasures as selfishness, but as a necessary part of a healthy life. In traditional Japanese culture, the concept of ikigai represents the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. Finding your ikigai means finding your life purpose, something that brings satisfaction and meaning. Japanese society values this pursuit of personal meaning as a key element of a good life. In many Indian traditions, self-realization, atmajnana, is considered the highest goal of human existence. This isn't a selfish act, but a deeply spiritual endeavor that benefits the whole society. These cultures don't view self-care as selfishness, but as a necessary part of a healthy life. We should learn from them. The economic aspect of saving on yourself. When we talk about saving on ourselves, we often neglect the economic aspect of this issue. The fact is that the unpaid work that women do, childcare, maintaining the household, emotional work in relationships, has enormous economic value. According to some estimates, if this work were paid at market rates, it would amount to trillions of dollars annually on a global level. When we save on ourselves, we don't just contribute to our own exhaustion, we actually support a system that systematically undervalues traditionally female work. We send a message that our time, our energy, our talents aren't worth investing in. Economist Marilyn Waring, author of the revolutionary book, If Women Counted, argues that traditional economic models deliberately ignore unpaid work that is mostly done by women. She proposes new economic models that would recognize and value all forms of work, including caring for others. When we stop saving on ourselves, we're actually participating in a broader economic transformation. We insist that our work has value. We demand a fairer distribution of resources, including the most precious resource of all, time. The spiritual aspect of self-care. For many women, spirituality is an important part of identity. But unfortunately, many spiritual traditions have been interpreted in a way that supports female self-denial. Concepts like humility, service, and sacrifice are often used to justify continuous neglect of one's own needs. However, all great spiritual traditions also contain teachings about the importance of self-knowledge, self-respect, and personal growth. In Buddhism, for example, the concept of metta, or loving-kindness, begins with love for oneself. You cannot truly love others if you don't love yourself. In Christianity, the commandment, love your neighbor as yourself, clearly presupposes love for oneself as the foundation for love for others. In the Jewish tradition, the concept of tikkun olam, repairing the world, includes both personal and collective transformation. Spirituality that supports constant self-denial isn't authentic spirituality. It's a distortion of spiritual teachings that serves to maintain existing social hierarchies. Neuroplasticity and changing patterns. The good news is that our brain has an incredible ability to change, even in adulthood. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to create new neural pathways in response to new experiences. What does this mean for women who want to stop saving on themselves? It means that no matter how long you've practiced self-denial, you can change these deeply ingrained patterns. You can create new neural pathways that support self-respect, self-love, and self-care. Dr. Richard Davidson, founder of the Center for Healthy Minds at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, has spent decades researching how the practice of mindfulness and self-compassion changes the structure and function of the brain. His findings show that regular practice of self-compassion increases activity in parts of the brain associated with positive emotions and decreases activity in parts associated with stress and anxiety. This research provides scientific confirmation of what many spiritual traditions have taught for thousands of years, that caring for oneself is the foundation for true care for others. Personal transformation. What happens when you stop saving on yourself? Something miraculous will happen. You'll start to grow. You might discover passions you didn't even know existed. You might develop new skills. You might connect with new people. You might, for the first time in your adult life, discover who you truly are, beyond the roles you play, beyond the expectations others have of you. You might discover strength, creativity, and wisdom that have always been within you, just waiting to be recognized and nurtured. But most importantly, you'll begin a relationship with yourself. You'll start treating yourself with the love and respect you deserve. And paradoxically, your relationships with others will also improve, because you'll be coming from a place of abundance, not lack. And you'll no longer be an empty cup from which everyone drinks, but no one fills. You'll be a source that flows continuously because it is itself filled. Broader social impact. When women collectively stop saving on themselves, it doesn't just change their individual lives, it changes society. Imagine a generation of girls growing up watching mothers who value themselves. They'll know that their worth is inherent, not determined by how much they can give to others. Imagine partnerships based on mutual respect and support, not on the expectation that one side will constantly give. Imagine workplaces that value women's contributions and recognize their need for balance. Imagine a society where self-respect, self-love, and self-care are core values we teach our children. A society in which no one, neither women nor men, has to sacrifice their well-being to earn a place at the table. Stopping saving on yourself isn't just a personal choice, it's a revolutionary act. Each of us has only one life, one journey through this world. And on that journey, we are both the traveler and the guide. If we constantly sacrifice our needs, our dreams, our joys, for whom are we saving these precious parts of ourselves? For what special occasion that may never come? Erich Maria Remarque didn't just write that a woman who saves on herself makes men want to save only on her. He was writing about a broader principle, that the way we treat ourselves teaches others how to treat us. His message wasn't a criticism of women, it was a message of empowerment. It was an invitation to reconsider deeply ingrained patterns that keep us small, that prevent us from living fully, that teach us we are worth less than we are. Throughout his works, Remarque explored deeply human themes: love, loss, war, suffering. He understood that self-denial is a kind of internal war, a kind of silent martyrdom. And he invited us to find our path to peace, not through sacrifice, but through self-affirmation. So I invite you, stop saving on your time. Stop saving on your dreams. Stop saving on your joys. Because life won't last forever. Imagine you're at the end of your life, looking back. What do you want to see? A life spent serving others, but never yourself? Or a life rich with experiences, growth, learning, love, including love for yourself? And at the end of the day, at the end of the year, at the end of life, the only things that will truly belong to you are your experiences, your growth, and your happiness. Everything else is transient. So start today. Do one small thing just for yourself. And tomorrow, do another. And the day after that, a third. And every day after that, decide again and again that you are worth investing in. Because you, yes, you, are worth every second, every effort, and every love that the world has to offer. And remember, it's not selfish to love yourself. It's the most important love story you'll ever tell. And once you learn to love yourself truly and deeply, you'll discover that you have more love to give than you ever thought possible. Because self-love isn't a closed circle, it's a spiral that expands outward, touching everything around you. It's a revolution that begins with one person, with you. And it's a revolution that changes everything. Stop saving on yourself. Start living. Start loving. Start today. Because if not now, when? And you, dear viewers, how do you view this topic? Did you recognize yourself in these words? Do you save on yourself, and in what way do you do it? Or perhaps you've already found a way to put yourself first in your life. Share your experiences, thoughts, and strategies in the comments below. Your experiences might be exactly what another woman who is struggling with these same questions needs. Your story could be the spark that helps someone finally start valuing themselves. And if you like this content, be sure to follow our channel for more videos about personal development, psychology, and life truths that can empower us all. Press the bell for notifications so you don't miss new videos that can change your view of life and yourself. Thank you for watching, and remember, you are worth every second invested in yourself.